Have you ever wondered how one family could quietly shape the destiny of nations? How a single name became whispered behind palace doors, traded on stock floors, and feared by kings themselves? This is not just a story about money. It's the story of power silent, generational, invisible power. Welcome to how the Rothschilds became the bankers of kings. Before we begin, if you believe that history is more than just dates and wars, if you want to uncover the hidden financial empires that rewrote human destiny, then hit that subscribe button, because this journey will change how you see wealth forever. Now, let's go back to the narrow streets of Frankfurt, Germany, in 1760. This is where the world's most powerful dynasty began, not with gold, not with influence, but with a single coin dealer and his 5 sons. In the mid-18th century, Europe was in constant flux. Empires rose and fell with wars. Currencies were unstable, gold was keen, and information was priceless. In the crowded Jewish ghetto of Frankfurt lived a man named Mayer Amschel Rothschild. He was a modest banker, a coin collector, and a man obsessed with the patterns of wealth. Mayer wasn't rich. He didn't have armies or castles, but he had something far more powerful: insight. He realized that real wealth wasn't in gold itself. It was in knowing where the gold would go next. By studying rare coins and foreign currencies, Mayer built relationships with merchants, noblemen, and even royal treasurers. He learned their secrets, their debts, their ambitions. Soon, he wasn't just selling coins. He was advising the powerful. But Mayer also understood a crucial lesson that every empire eventually forgets. Power built on one man dies with him. So, he built a system. That system was his 5 sons. He saw them not just as his children, but as 5 arrows, each aimed at the heart of European finance. He trained them meticulously, not in war or politics, but in the art of money, information, and absolute loyalty. His eldest, Amschel, would remain in Frankfurt to anchor the family business. Solomon was sent to Vienna, the capital of the mighty Habsburg Empire. Nathan, the most aggressive and brilliant of them all, was dispatched to London, the world's burgeoning financial center. Karl went to Naples, controlling the Mediterranean trade routes, and James, the youngest, was sent to Paris, the cultural and political hub of the continent. Mayer's strategy was revolutionary. He wasn't just setting up branches. He was creating the world's first multinational financial institution. The 5 brothers were more than just bankers. They were a private intelligence network. Using a system of couriers, carrier pigeons, and coded messages, they could transmit financial and political information across Europe faster than any government or rival. While kings waited days for news from the battlefield, the Rothschilds knew the outcome within hours. This information advantage was their true goldmine. They knew which governments were on the brink of collapse, which stocks would soar, and which bonds would plummet. Then came their defining moment: the Napoleonic Wars. Europe was plunged into chaos, and armies crisscrossed the continent. For most, war meant destruction and loss. For the Rothschilds, it was the ultimate opportunity. While nations bled money to fund their armies, the brothers devised a system to move funds across enemy lines. Nathan, from his base in London, financed the British war effort, particularly Wellington's army fighting Napoleon in Spain. The challenge was immense: how to get British gold to the front lines through a French-controlled continent. The Rothschilds used their network. They bought up British government bonds, sold them in other European markets, and used the proceeds to secretly supply Wellington's troops. It was a high-risk, high-reward operation that relied on speed, secrecy, and absolute trust between the brothers. They weren't just financing a war. They were proving that their financial network could operate beyond the control of kings and empires. Their reputation soared. They were no longer just bankers. They were indispensable. The climax of this gamble came at the Battle of Waterloo in 1815. Legend has it that a Rothschild courier delivered the news of Napoleon's defeat to Nathan in London a full 24 hours before the official government messenger arrived. Knowing the outcome before anyone else on the London Stock Exchange, Nathan faced a monumental choice. He could have spread the news and made a quick, honest profit. But he was playing a bigger game. Instead, he began to sell. He sold everything, dumping British government bonds in a dramatic display. The market, seeing the legendary Nathan Rothschild selling, panicked. Everyone assumed it meant Wellington had lost. Prices crashed. A wave of selling swept the exchange as investors desperately tried to offload their bonds before they became worthless. Then, at the very bottom of the market, Nathan's agents quietly bought back every bond they could get their hands on for a fraction of their original price. When the official news of Wellington's victory finally arrived, the value of those bonds skyrocketed. The Rothschild family's fortune multiplied in a single day. The Waterloo gamble cemented their position as the undisputed kings of European finance. With their newfound wealth and influence, the brothers became empire builders. They weren't conquering lands with armies, but with capital. After the Napoleonic Wars, Europe was in ruins and desperate for reconstruction funds. The Rothschilds were there to provide them. They financed railways that connected the continent, canals that opened new trade routes, and mines that fueled the Industrial Revolution. When Austria's empire was on the verge of bankruptcy, it was Salomon Rothschild who saved it with a massive loan. When France needed to pay off its war indemnities, it was James Rothschild who arranged the financing. They effectively held the balance of power. They could fund a king's war or refuse it, causing his ambitions to crumble. They negotiated peace treaties, not as diplomats, but as the men who controlled the flow of money that made war and peace possible. Their family motto became Concordia, Integritas, Industria, Harmony, Integrity. Industry, their 5-row crest, symbolized the unity of the five brothers. They had transcended banking to become a political force in their own right, a dynasty whose influence was felt in every corner of the continent. Their power was no longer just about money. It was the power to shape the very course of history, a power beyond thrones. Naturally, such immense and quiet power bred suspicion and myth. As the 19th century wore on, the Rothschilds became the subject of countless conspiracy theories. They were accused of starting wars for profit, of controlling governments from the shadows, and of being a secret cabal that manipulated the world. While many of these stories were wild exaggerations, they were rooted in a kernel of truth. The family's unprecedented global influence and their preference for operating behind the scenes. The Rothschild legacy is complex. On one hand, they were pioneers of modern finance, whose innovations helped build the modern world. They were philanthropists who funded hospitals, universities, and art collections. On the other hand, they were the ultimate insiders, a dynasty whose wealth was built on information arbitrage and wartime financing. They demonstrated that true, lasting power wasn't held by those who sat on thrones, but by those who controlled the money that kept the throne standing. By the mid-19th century, the Rothschilds weren't just bankers. They were a European institution. Their influence was so vast, it was like an invisible crown, shaping policy without ever holding public office. Kings and ministers sought their counsel, not just their gold. When a government needed funds for a new railway, a public project, or even just to stay afloat, they often turned to the Rothschilds first. The family's 5 branches, spread across Europe, operated like a perfectly synchronized financial machine. A message sent from London could trigger a market reaction in Vienna within days, a speed unheard of at the time. This network gave them unparalleled insight and the ability to move capital where it was needed most, or where it would yield the greatest influence. They weren't just participating in the economy. In many ways, they were conducting it. The Rothschilds' financial touch was everywhere. They were instrumental in financing Britain's purchase of the Suez Canal shares from Egypt, a move that secured a vital trade artery for the British Empire. This wasn't a simple loan. It was a strategic, geopolitical investment. They funded Cecil Rhodes's diamond mining ventures in Africa, helping to create the De Beers monopoly. They financed the construction of vast railway networks across Europe, connecting cities and economies like never before. Think of them as the venture capitalists of their era. But on a global scale, their capital fueled the Industrial Revolution, underwriting everything from coal mines to textile factories. They weren't just moving money, they were building the infrastructure of the modern world, one massive project at a time. But as the 19th century drew to a close, The world was changing. The very nationalism that the Rothschilds had sometimes helped to finance began to create deep divisions across Europe. The family, with its international identity, found itself in a precarious position. While they had often worked to maintain peace, understanding that stability was good for business, the rising tides of conflict were too strong to hold back. During times of war, they faced a complex dilemma. Do they finance their home nations, even if it means funding a conflict against a country where another branch of the family resides? This period saw their influence tested. While they continued to be major financial players, the rise of massive state-backed central banks and the escalating political tensions began to challenge their unique position. The intricate web of alliances they had built over a century was now strained by the looming shadow of global conflict. This era of war and change also fueled countless stories. No family in financial history is surrounded by more myths and conspiracy theories than the Rothschilds. Their immense wealth, their privacy, and their strategic influence made them an easy target for suspicion. Tales began to circulate about them controlling world governments from the shadows, instigating wars for profit, and manipulating global events. It's crucial to separate fact from fiction here. Yes, they were incredibly powerful and influential. Yes, their network gave them an information advantage. But many of the wildest claims are simply not supported by historical evidence. These myths often grew from a place of fear and misunderstanding, tapping into anxieties about the power of international finance. The reality is that, while they were masters of the financial world, they were also subject to the same historical forces as everyone else, including the decline of aristocratic power and the rise of new economic systems. So, what is their lasting impact? The legacy of power. The Rothschild legacy isn't just about wealth. It's about innovation. They pioneered international finance, creating a model for the modern global banking system. Their use of a private courier network was the 19th century equivalent of a high-speed encrypted data network. They understood the power of information and diversification long before these became standard business school concepts. Beyond finance, the family became major patrons of the arts and sciences, and their philanthropic efforts have supported education, healthcare, and cultural institutions for generations. Their name is on hospitals, galleries, and conservation projects around the world. The dynasty proved that financial power could be translated into lasting cultural and social influence, shaping society in ways that went far beyond the balance sheets. The story of the Rothschilds is a remarkable journey, from a Frankfurt ghetto to the palaces of European royalty. It's a testament to ambition, ingenuity, and the power of family unity. They didn't just get rich, they defined what it meant to be a global financial power. They showed the world how capital, when strategically deployed, could build nations, fund industries, and shape the course of history. Their story is a lesson in the dynamics of power, the flow of money, and the intricate dance between finance and politics. From Mayer Amschel's humble beginnings to his son's continental empire, the rise of the House of Rothschild is one of the most compelling chapters in the history of capitalism. Their world is gone, but the principles they mastered continue to resonate in our own globalized financial age. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into the history of the Rothschild family. It's a complex and fascinating story with lessons that still apply today. If you found this interesting, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you don't miss our next historical exploration.